and they've got less than a 20% chance that anybody's going to pick them up in the portal. So this idea that I'm going to go in the portal and I'm going to make money and get a better deal is not the real world. The real world is there's something that in the industry is called the dark portal, which is all the recruiting that happens behind the scene.
Welcome, Coaches Call listeners. This is Brian Pope, the COO of the Texas High School Coaches Association. As you start your school year, don't forget to check out all of our toolkits, which are designed to help coaches throughout their season. We have toolkits for Our Day to Shine, Officials Appreciation, and Teachers Appreciation under the Downloads tab on our website. And be sure to review the Heat Illness Prevention Playbook in the Coaches Education tab to find the latest resources on how to keep your athletes safe in the heat. We hope you enjoy this series of episodes that examine the high school coach's role in the college recruitment of their athletes. We want to thank all of our coaches for continuing to make a positive impact in the young people in your campuses and in your community.
Did you know that you can use podcasting to not only share the great news about your athletes and your programs, but as a fundraiser for your booster club? Yes, Lone Star Gridiron produced the 5th podcast in history and has been doing it nearly 20 years. We are expanding now to do shows outside of football. So whatever your sport, reach out to us at 713-269-4620, and we'll discuss how you can use this amazing tool to supercharge your program. And the best part, we do all the heavy lifting. Text your name and school to 713-269-4620. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Coach's Call. I'm Chris Daly, and I have some very special guests today. I'm going to be joined by Joe Martin, the Texas High School Coaches Association Executive Director. He's going to be interviewing Tim Prokup with Eccker Sports, and we're going to talk about NIL. It's going to be amazing. So without further ado, Joe Martin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, thanks. I'm excited about being here. I appreciate you allowing Tim and I to share some information today with our viewership. And so we're excited about being here. You know, this is the 4th installment of our 4-part series on recruiting, and we're saving what we think is the most complex issue, name, image, and likeness, for the last segment of this series. Our goal for this conversation today is to educate our coaches and parents of high school student athletes who are going through the recruiting process, to give them, given the complexity and the importance of this issue, we want to make sure that they have the information they need help with in navigating their new world in the recruiting process. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but I got a guy that does with me today. So we're joined by Tim Prokup, the co-founder of Eccker Sports on NIL Education Company, and very proud partner of THSCA, a close friend and a great supporter of THSCA. Welcome, Tim, to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Tim, as we start this conversation, I think it would really be good for our listeners to understand how NIL started in the first place. And can you provide an overview of how it started and really where are we today, NIL at the collegiate level?
Yeah, well, this is a process that's been going on for about the last 15 years. I'll just give you a quick history on how we got to where we are, and then we can kind of go from there. But in 1995, Ed O'Bannon was the player of the year in the NCAA tournament, helped UCLA win the national championship in basketball. And about 10 years later, he was sitting in his friend's apartment in Los Angeles, and his friend was playing NCAA basketball from EA Sports. And he noticed that there was a player from UCLA that wore his number 31, that looked just like him. And he asked the question, how much did the EA pay NCAA for the right to use my image? And they found out that there was $1 million of transaction, and none of the athletes got to benefit from that. And so he filed a lawsuit that claimed that was an antitrust violation, because the student athletes couldn't participate in the value of the what was being created. That went through Judge Wilkins in Northern California, and eventually to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with that. And as you recall, in about 2014, the NCAA changed its rules around what student athletes could receive on scholarship. So before that, it was scholarship, tuition, housing, and food. And after the 2014 case, then they started allowing cost of living expenses. And so depending on what city you were in, you could get another $2,500 a month to be supportive. So that's where it started. It was, and in that lawsuit, by the way, Bill Russell was also a plaintiff in that lawsuit, as was some other really well-known basketball players. Then Sean Alston filed a lawsuit saying, why do we stop there? Why can we only receive cost of living and tuition? Why couldn't we go out and do commercials? Why couldn't we do commercials like pro athletes did? So he filed a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. And in 2021, the ruling came down from the Supreme Court that the NCAA was in violation again of the antitrust lawsuit. And Judge Kavanaugh, who wrote the opinion, labeled NCAA athletes as a labor force. By their very activities, they were actually generating millions of dollars for these universities and these conferences, but they weren't participating in any of that revenue. And so that's where the NIL thing turned into the NCAA said, well, you can go ahead and do NIL as long as it doesn't have to do with recruiting, pay to play, or have third-party recruiters being involved. Well, we all know that is what's happening. So kids are being paid to come to school, kids are being paid to play, and third-party collectives have been involved. And then after that, George House, who had been a swimmer at Arizona State, filed a lawsuit against the NCAA and said, well, what about all the student athletes that happened before 2021? What about all those guys? You guys were making money. None of those guys got any access to that money. So the House versus the NCAA lawsuit started. And this time, instead of letting it go through the courts, Charlie Baker, who's the new president of the NCAA, he convened all the commissioners of the Power Five conference and said, look, we've got to stop this now. And the only way we're going to be able to prevent the complete disassembly of the NCAA is if we give these student athletes a piece of the pie. And so in that settlement of the House lawsuit, the commissioners of the conferences and the presidents of the schools have agreed to share revenue now with student athletes on campus. And what the NCAA is going to do is try to get an antitrust exemption so that they can create a collective bargaining agreement, much like the NFL and NBA have, so that revenue can be shared with the student athletes, and the NCAA could actually govern the NCAA again, which it can't right now. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today.
That's a real in-depth history of where we are, and very accurate and very much appreciated. You know, I think for coaches and athletes and parents that are listening today to this podcast, they're gonna appreciate that. They're gonna let that kind of sink in on what all you just said. And then I think the next question is, so how does NIL fit into the recruiting process today with the new rules with profit share and the Charlie Baker world that we're living in today?
Yeah, so Charlie Baker, when he became the president of the NCAA, was very clear about a couple of things. One, that the realities of athletics at a place like Texas or Texas A&M are very different than the realities of athletics at a place like Texas State or Trinity College. So he's been trying to create an idea of dividing the groups into appropriate things so that laws would apply to those. So what it means to student athletes today is, depending on how good of a player they are and how highly recruited they are, they have all kinds of different opportunities now to earn money while they're in college. And as part of the House settlement, the NCAA is also now going to allow the coaches to pay the players directly from revenue share that they get from TV revenue and from ticket sales and marketing deals. So now everybody that's being recruited, particularly at the Division I level in college athletics, has the opportunity to participate and earn money for their name, image, and likeness while they're in college.
And so as an athlete is being recruited and parents are involved in that recruiting process, and hopefully the high school coach is directly involved in that recruiting process as well, as we call that, straight line recruiting in Texas, where the head coach should be hopefully very engaged in that recruiting process as that parent and athlete are having conversations with coaches on an official recruiting visit. When should name, image, and likeness really come up in their recruiting process? When should they start talking about that? How should they talk about it? What, in your opinion, would be appropriate time to bring that up on an official or unofficial visit?
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of coaches about that specifically here this week. If NIL is just one piece of the decision criteria on where you decide to go be a student athlete into college level, and the student athletes that recognize that and know that it belongs as just one part of the decision process, they don't bring it up until the coaches bring it up. If you go into an official visit and sit down with a coach and the first thing you say is how much NIL money you're going to give me, a lot of those coaches are going to be very turned off by that, because that indicates that the only thing you're worried about is yourself, right? And to have a team, you need a bunch of players you can trust. So what I would advise parents and student athletes is, if the coach brings it up, certainly engage in the conversation, but don't make it the leading thing that you're going to talk about. Because if you do, then that's going to lower your value in the mind of those coaches, and they're going to start they'll look at other options. So it generally will come up at the Division I level. The coach will bring it up during the recruiting process. And when you get on the official visit, at some point in time, there will be a discussion about NIL, but let the coaches bring that up. Don't lead with it.
I think that's really, really good information for our recruitable athletes to hear, and their parents and the high school coach, as well as they're informing their athletes how to act, how to communicate while they're on an official or unofficial visit. Tim, those NIL deals that kids are involved in typically are going to happen a lot more at our Power 5 schools versus our lower a group of 5 and then FCS and D2. Can you talk to there's more kids going to go to FCS and D2 than there is to Power 5. And so Can you talk to what that looks like and how those kids that are at that level, how should they respond or react, or what should be their thought process if I'm going to take an official visit to a D2 or FCS school versus a D1 school or FBS?
Yeah, and I would say, again, for the lower level, the group of 5, the FCS, Division II, Division III schools, right? It has to be just a part of the conversation. It's if you're making a decision between Montana State and SF Austin, for example, and you're trying to decide which one you want to go to, whether or not, Montana State or SF Austin is not going to be able to offer very much money. They just don't have it to offer. And so all of the other things about what type of education can you get, what kind of value can you bring, is it a place you could play at, and those things. Do you like the coaches? Do you like the philosophy? Because what I think is true in all business, if you bring value, you'll extract value, right? And so I would be more focused on, how do I bring the most value to the place where I can create the most value for myself, and then let the NIL stuff kind of take care of itself. And if you do a nice job of building your social presence and your social network and all that kind of stuff, you can leverage that if you're successful on the court or on the field or on the pitch, right? But if all you're worried about is how am I going to make money or who's going to pay me the most money, you lose your value in the coach's mind, and then you lose the focus on the things that are really important. It's just part of the conversation. It doesn't lead the conversation, is my opinion.
And so that would be your recommendation to those FCS D2 athletes in whatever sport they're participating in. But really and truly, that would be exact same recommendation to those going to a Power 5. And that NIL is at the bottom of that conversation, because they really, on a recruiting trip, official or unofficial, they need to figure out if they want to be there, if those coaches are their kind of people, if those kids are on that team or people they can be teammates with, if they like the community, they like the university, they have the progression educationally that they're looking for. If they have the degrees, it's all those things about being a college student athlete, with NIL really being at the back end of that conversation.
I totally agree with that, Joe. And I would even go further and say it's just like if your child gets a new job with the company, say it's outside of athletics. What's the best advice you can give somebody when they start a new job?
Yep.
Show up with a good attitude, be on time, be a type of person people can trust, bring value, and let the rest of it work itself out. If we do that and we focus on that, if you're an SEC level basketball player or football player or volleyball player, there's going to be money involved, whether it's $50,000 or $100,000. It's going to be in line no matter what school you end up going to. So don't make that the primary thing. Make the thing, where can I go and bring the most value so that then I can extract value out of that later. And the other thing is, as we all know, after college, less than 3% of the student athletes that play in college ever go on to play professional sports. So, there's a very high likelihood that I'm not going to be a professional basketball player or football player. So what school is going to put me in a position so that for the rest of my life, I can have the most opportunities and where I like being, and I like the community, and I like the education, and I like the coaches and all that stuff. And then it's my responsibility as a student athlete to show up every day with a great attitude and do the best I can. And then the rest of it will take care of itself.
Agree totally. I think well put. And I think that's something that needs to resonate through parents and coaches to our student athletes being recruited. There's a lot of questions out there that we get here in our office from coaches, from parents, and from some kids that were around. Do kids in Texas get offered NIL money when they are on a recruiting trip?
So most of the Division I universities, particularly for football and basketball, do offer NIL opportunities for student athletes. The challenge for kids in Texas is if they take advantage of those, they would lose their eligibility to participate in UIL sports after that. So let's say it's a football player goes to visit Alabama. Alabama offers them $25,000 to be as part of the recruiting trip, and they want to play basketball after the football season's over. They can't accept the money. If they do, and the UIL finds out, then they would have violated the amateur rule and they wouldn't be able to play. So you just got to be very aware of that. As a student athlete in Texas, because Texas is one of the few states that still does not allow a student athlete to participate in NIL and also participate in UIL activities.
Right. So as our student athletes leave the state of Texas on a recruiting trip, is there things they need to know if they're going outside the state versus inside the state? Is there any differences? The difference between being recruited in Texas and outside of Texas, I guess.
No, not really. Every state is kind of its own unique scenario, but it's really about what level you're at. Are you an SEC or a Big 10 or Big 12 level athlete, or are you an FCS level athlete? But how you're recruited and all that stuff. The only difference for kids in Texas is if they want to continue playing UIL sports after they've been recruited, they can't take any money until after they have completed their competition.
Right. So how does NIL vary by sport, Tim? How does it change? Do kids in volleyball or baseball or soccer face the same kind of issues as a football player, vice versa?
Again, it comes back to the amount of revenue that those sports generate. If you're a Division I football or basketball program, men's or women, or you're a Division I baseball program, there are billions of dollars of revenue that get generated through TV deals and ticketing and all that stuff. And so for those student athletes, there's a lot more money available. And in fact, as part of the settlement with the House versus the NCAA lawsuit, the commissioners and presidents have agreed to share a percentage of that revenue with those student athletes now. So they're going to now have revenue to be made. If you're going to an FCS school or Division II school, that's not going to be part of the program. And so again, it's just going to depend on what type of opportunities are available at those universities to help be additive to the scholarship that you're going to get, the housing that you're going to get, the living allowance and those kinds of things. NIL will be just a supplement to that, but won't supersede that very much. And so again, it's great. And there's a lot of student athletes in those other sports. Like look at Livy Dunn at LSU. She's a gymnast who earns millions of dollars a year through her social media activities. They also won a national championship last year, so they have a great team. But she's done very well, and there's a lot of examples of student athletes at all levels within their community using their name, image, and likeness within their community to create value. But you have to be able to generate value on the field or the court first. And then you can go into the local community and find the local retailers and quick serve restaurants and things like that would want you to help represent their things, and you can do deals with them now, right? So it just has opened up a whole new opportunity for student athletes to actually earn money by working outside of their sport now at the college level in those smaller schools.
So we hear about profit share, which you alluded to. You didn't name it that, but that profit share is money from TV. That's FBS. That's Power 5, and then NIL. Really, as that latter part of what you just talked about, that's going to be an opportunity for kids. There's along with that, from a football standpoint, FBS standpoint, a roster limit where there's no walk-on moving forward in 2025. There's a roster limit of 105 for everybody. And then there's profit sharing gauged in that 105. And then there's NIL outside of that. And so you want to hit just a little bit of that mindset of what's that going to do to a high school kid being recruited based on no walk-on, roster limit, and then maybe just a little bit more about profit share versus NIL.
Yeah, so part of the settlement with the NCAA in-house was that those universities, those Power 5 universities, agreed to share a percentage of the TV revenue and the marketing dollars, and then the schools themselves can decide how much of that gets paid to each individual athlete, right? So for a Texas and a Texas A&M, it's about $22 million a year, and they can share that $22 million with all the student athletes in any way that they want to do it, right? And so it's really a pay for play today, right? But it's a way to get some sort of a salary cap so that one school is not spending $40 million and another school only has $5 million. So it's a way to create that. So that's what the revenue share piece is. The student athletes that are being recruited today, they also added that you can have up to 105 scholarships, but no walk-ons, and so that is going to affect the high school guys, I think, substantially. So today, if you look at a football roster or even a basketball roster, the top third of their roster are their starters. The middle third of their roster are all the young players that they're trying to develop. And the bottom third are the ones that just they don't think are going to play. And every year, those staffs are trying to upgrade the bottom third, right? And it used to be they would go and get high school kids, bring them in, see if they would develop, and then if great, they would become players. If not, they would move on. Well, now what they're doing is they're looking around at every university below, at a division below them or a division above them, saying, where can I find people to replace the ones that aren't good enough to play here? And so they're going into the portal to do that. So now, instead of just competing against all the high school guys across the country, our high school student athletes are also competing against the college kids that are going to become available in the portal. So what my advice to a high school student athlete right now is, if you're a top tier guy that's getting recruited at SEC level and you get a scholarship, that's fantastic. If at the end of the process somebody comes along and Texas says, well, we can't take you, or Oklahoma says, I can't take you because we're going to get a kid from New Mexico State, don't be discouraged. Go find a lower level Group of 5 team or an FCS team, bring tremendous value to that program, and then you'll be right back in the recruiting process the next year, because every one of those major universities is constantly watching for who's playing well and who's doing well, and where can we get kids to come in and replace the ones that aren't going to be able to play here. So I would be more open now as a high school student athlete to take a deal. Like my son went to Montana State originally, and he played so well and was an All-American 2 years in a row that Oregon called and said, hey, why don't you come play for us, right? And he didn't go in with that intention, but that's what happened because he brought so much value to the program. So if you don't get the opportunity you're looking for right away, it doesn't mean it won't come. You're just going to have to go work for it and go bring value somewhere and prove you're the kind of guy people can trust, do really well, and then and those opportunities will present themselves down the road.
So that's a positive approach or outlook on the portal. There's also that negative side to the portal, that you're already at New Mexico State or you're already at Oregon or XYZ college, and you get mad at your coach, you get upset with your situation, you're not happy, and you get in the portal. Talk to us about the negative side of that and the chances of coming out of that portal with a scholarship, with a place to go, versus the chances of not.
I think this is really really important for our high school coaches in Texas to understand. I think a lot of them do in talking with them. But if a student athlete who used to play for me at high school called me and said, "Hey, coach, I don't like it here. I think I'm going to go in the portal," the first question you have to ask that guy, do you have any other school that's recruiting you? Has somebody called you and said, if you go into the portal, we'll pick you up? And if the answer to that question is yes, then we need to evaluate who that school is and what that opportunity, whatever. But if the answer is no, I just don't like it here, if they enter the portal, they're foregoing the scholarship at the school that they have, and that's probably not coming back. And they've got less than a 20% chance that anybody's going to pick them up in the portal. So this idea that I'm going to go in the portal and I'm going to make money and get a better deal is not the real world. The real world is there's something that in the industry is called the dark portal, which is all the recruiting that happens behind the scene. And then the portal is just a place to go to leave one place to go to the other place. So like, for example, last year at Arkansas State, there was a freshman linebacker that was really, really good. The first 6 weeks of the season was dominant. And the last part of the season, the kid just completely fell off the radar. He stopped coming to practice and stopped working hard. And they found out it was because Memphis called him and said, "Hey, after the season, go in the portal, we'll pick you up." And so he is like, "Okay, I'm going to go to Memphis," right? But he didn't just jump in the portal and then all of a sudden Memphis saw him in the portal and said, "Hey," what those coaches are doing during the week, they're going to PFF and they're pulling up statistics on every player in college football in America. And they're putting a list together of the best ones that are out there, and then they start recruiting them during the season. So if your student athlete isn't getting recruited specifically by a team, I would advise him not to go into the portal.
I think that's great advice. And the other thing is, we as an association really encourage all of our coaches to stay connected to their athletes as they go to college in that recruiting process. And I know the recruiting process for collegiate coaches now, if I'm recruiting you, Tim, and you don't come to my school, I'm going to stay connected to you because you might end up coming to my school, and I'm probably going to go back to your high school coach to recruit you because you're at school X over here. And so it's back to our high school coaches of just staying connected. Those are your kids, those are your babies, those are people you raised that you're responsible for, and stay connected with them until they're done playing.
Joe, I heard a great compliment from a college coach yesterday who said that in Texas, it's the cleanest, easiest place to recruit kids because the head coaches are involved. And in other states in the Southeast, there's a lot of other stuff you got to deal with. It's really uncomfortable at times. So a compliment to you guys on the straight line recruiting. It does make a difference for those coaches.
And I think our 13 FBS coaches and our FCS and our D2 coaches in this state all recognize the straight line recruiting piece and appreciate our head coaches being involved in that recruiting process. And we don't have too many third parties. There's still some out there, but the preference is to go straight through us. So as we wrap this up, I have one final question for you, Tim. As money gets involved and you start talking about NIL and you start talking about revenue share, you hear a lot of rumors about athletes making lots of money. Well, he went to this school over here and he's making $500,000 or he's making $4 million or what can you tell us about market value and what kids should think about? What kind of money are they worth, and how is that valued?
It's just like any sport, right? The best players are going to have the opportunity to make the most money. on average, a college football player at the Division I level is making about $3,500 a month, so about 40 grand a year in NIL money. At Nebraska, for example, as you know, the freshmen come in there and they say, hey, what do you want? You want 40 grand or do you want a new car that's worth 40 grand, right? And they choose that, right? But then you've got the Quinn Ewers of the world, or you've got the Bryce Youngs of the world. And those guys get paid more because they're more valuable and the schools pay them more. And then on top of that, because they're so recognizable, they get to do TV endorsements, do the Dr. Pepper deals and all that kind of stuff, right? So I would say the very small 1% are in that, $500,000 or above mark that are making millions of dollars. And there's some that are. But for the most part, a student athlete should expect around at the Division I Power 5 level, about 40 grand a year is about what they're making.
Yeah. I think that helps with set the expectation for our student athletes and their parents as they go into this process, because rumors run rampant and they get to thinking they're worth a lot more than what they're going to be offered. And we don't want them walking away disappointed. I don't think they're going to be disappointed on this podcast today. You've done a great job, and I really appreciate you coming on. Chris, we're going to throw it back to you, but thank you for allowing us to have this conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. That was amazing. Wonderful stuff. And Tim, thank you for not only the information, but the history, because I have to say that NCAA 2014 football computer game, that was the last video game I actively played. So I have to thank Mr. O'Bannon for getting me to stop playing computer games.
well, they stopped doing it, but they just announced that they're gonna it's coming back out in 25.
I know, but I'm over it now. I'm not taking any more computer game time.
Well, and Chris, I will tell, if anybody's interested, if you go to eckersports.com, that's ECCKER sports.com. There is a resource hub that has all of that information in it, all the latest stuff that's going on. It's constantly updated on a daily basis. So it's a great place to go for people to gather information if they need more.
And the Eccker Sports Group, Tim and his partner, Randy Eccker, there are NIL experts in Texas, and they help us with all of our NIL education, with our coaches, with our association, with our staff, and they keep us updated what happens across the country as laws change at the high school level and at the collegiate level. And so their website is fantastic and serves a great need, a great educational need for coaches and parents.
I love it. Thank you again, gentlemen, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, of course, I want to thank our guest, but I also want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me what I consider the most valuable thing you can give, your time and your attention. And I know you don't do it to hear me. You hear it for the great messages provided by the THSCA. And hey, if you'd like to associate your company with the THSCA and the Coach's Call podcast, limited sponsorship opportunities are available. You can reach out to me, Chris Daly, 713-269-4620, or head over to my website, freshmediaworks.com. Once again, thank you so much for supporting Texas high school coaches. Please share this show out to everybody you can so that we can help share these important messages. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time on The Coach's Call. The interviews in this show are brought to you by the Texas High School Coaches Association. THSCA provides to its more than 26,000 members access to the people, events, tools, and resources to help them thrive in the profession, become trusted leaders in their communities, and live balanced and successful lives. The work and sacrifice coaches do every day is vital to the development and success of student athletes. The THSCA supports these efforts. We fight for every coach, provide them with the connections and resources to improve their lives, and help all student athletes throughout the state enjoy lasting success. The mission statement is simply this: to help and serve Texas high school coaches as they work to help and serve student athletes. Helping coaches help kids. For more information on the THSCA, visit www.thsca.com.